Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today for the role of mega trails in nature conservation. My name is Kara, and I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the program manager at Partnership for the National Trail System, or PNTS. For those of you who may not be familiar with PNTS, we are a small nonprofit that's a collective voice, a resource provider, and a hub for exchange, learning, and action for the National Trail System. As the only 501c3 nonprofit focused on the 32 national scenic and historic trails, PNTS brings together professionals, leaders, and trail and hiking enthusiasts to promote a thriving, accessible, and inclusive national trail system. I will be serving as today's webinar moderator, and I'm speaking to you from the lands of the Onondaga and Haudenosaunee people. PNTS recognizes that land acknowledgements are an important first step in acknowledging that we are on stolen Indigenous lands. In a moment, I'll put a link in the chat where you can explore what native lands you currently reside on. And please enter into the chat where you're joining from as well, and let us know what organization you're affiliated with. PNTS recognizes the need to commit further and engage in meaningful partnerships. We're committed to working with Indigenous people, organizations, and communities, and having Indigenous people lead the way through initiatives such as our Tribal Consultation webinar series. And our commitment proceeds into the future through projects such as the Native Lands National Trails Project, which provides resources to help advance National Trail System awareness and education of Indigenous knowledge and stewardship. During today's webinar, you will learn about Ernesto Viveiros de Castro's groundbreaking PhD research that explores the contributions of megatrails to conservation efforts, from generating a sense of place to serving as ecological corridors, discovering multifaceted benefits of trails based on extensive surveys and interviews along trails like the Appalachian, Pacific Crest, and Continental Divide trails. Ernesto is a biologist and national park manager from Brazil. He got his PhD in interdisciplinary ecology at University of Florida in 2023, studying the U.S. National Scenic Trails. He's been working in the Brazilian Federal Agency for Protected Areas for 21 years, and presently he's the superintendent at the Serra de Orgohas National Park, the third oldest national park in Brazil. Ernesto is also a member of the World Commission on Protected Areas, the IUCN Tourism Specialists Group, and the World Trails Network Trails and Conservation Task Team. The webinar today is being recorded and will be available to everyone that registered following this presentation. Today we have about an hour for the session, and at the end we'll have some time for Q&A. So please put any questions or comments you have as we go into the chat. And now it's my pleasure to hand it off to Ernesto.
Hello. Hello, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thanks to PNTS for inviting me and for everyone to be present online. It's a pleasure to share some of my findings in my PhD. And let me share my screen to present some ideas and results. Okay, let's start. So, okay. So, Kara introduced me, but let me tell a little why I'm here and how I choose this research subjects. So from 20 years ago, I have been working as superintendent of two national parks in Brazil, and also a national coordinator of ecotourism in the parks agents, the federal parks agents in Brazil, ICMBio. And then in 1219, I went to the US to study the National Scenic Trails, and now I'm again to Serra dos Órgãos National Park as superintendent. Serra dos Órgãos National Park is one of the most important points to practice climbing and hiking in Brazil. We have the most traditional overnight trail in Brazil. And after, in Tijuca, I coordinate the implementation of a long distance trail, the Trans-Carioca Trail, that crosses 6 parks inside the Rio de Janeiro city. And then I was invited to present my experience in managing these 2 trails. And I started to imagine how I could connect them. These 2 parks are distance around 100 kilometers, one from another, 60 miles. And then the idea was growing and growing. And in 2012, I proposed the implementation of a mega trail in Brazil with 4,200 kilometers, around 3,000 miles. It was the first Brazilian mega trail proposed. It was the Atlantic Forest Trail that is being implemented since then. Atlantic Forest is a biodiversity hotspot, crossing a mountain range with some similarities with the mountain range where the Appalachian Trail is, the Appalachian Mountains. The trail crossed 10 national parks and more than 100 other protected areas, territories of traditional communities, and many more. And then we planned this trail as a conservation initiative. So I started to think about the benefits. We always argue in favor of these long distance trails, right? It's important, before present my findings, it's important explain why I'm using the term mega trail. It's not so commonly used. It's more common the long distance trail, the term long distance trail. But long distance trail is a really general term that encompasses trails from few overnights to hundreds of thousands of kilometers and months to through hike. So I decided to use the term mega trail proposed by Timothy and Boyd in 2015 to differentiate these very long trails to another trails that can be considered long distance, but not, because we are thinking in extensive landscapes, right? So I defined mega trails as trails longer than 1,000 kilometers, requiring at least 30 days to be through hiked and crossing different ecoregions, biomes, or political borders, such as regions or countries, right? I think probably most of the audience is really involved with this subject. So trail advocates commonly use these arguments in favor of these mega trails, like promote outdoor experiences, sense of place and connection to nature, generate economic benefits for local communities and other benefits for local communities, and provide works that as climate corridors or forest corridors, promoting habitat connectivity. But actually, there are really few studies evaluating whether these mega trails should affect conservation outcomes. This was my motivation for this PhD, study how the American long distance of mega trails are effective as conservation strategies, right? So I decided to explore these 3 main questions using 3 approaches: from the hiker's perspective, from the local community's perspective, and from natural environment perspectives, using a multidisciplinary approach to explore these questions. Then I decided to study the triple crow of hiking as case studies, the Appalachian Trail, Continental Divide, and Pacific Crest Trail. And to explore the hiker's perspective, my interest was the role of mega trails in creating meaning and sense of place for larger landscapes. Not only we have a lot of studies showing how contact with nature, hiking, promote the sense of place, but there is a significant difference in terms of the extension or the dimension of this sense of place promoted by these mega trails. Trying to answer these questions, I did an extensive survey. I interviewed 600 hikers in 18 points distributed along the 3 trails. So I drove around 25,000 miles and hiked around 300 miles to interview people in different points of these 3 trails. Combining points more popular and more isolated sections to interview different profiles. So I applied surveys using some traditional scales to test sense of place, using Likert scales, maps, and combining with some open questions, and analyzed the data using exploratory and confirmatory factor analysis of variance, t-tests, and other statistical techniques. And exploring three questions in this subject. The first one was, does sense of place vary with the hiking duration? So long distance hikers or through hikers show a different level of sense of place compared with short hikers. And I found a significant difference with long distance hikers. The more than 500 miles hikes showed a significant higher sense of place than day hikers, for example, or than some day hikers, multi hikers. And I also used some combination of some techniques to test the scale of this place, what they call their place. And then I also found that long distance hikers have a significant more broader, more extensive place in their minds compared with day hikers, right? Here's an example of the heat maps I used, the application in the Northern Appalachian Trail. At the left, you can see the answers of day hikers when I ask them to pick up to 10 points that are important or significant for them. And day hikers are not. Here is the Appalachian Trail. Could you see my arrow, my mouse arrow? Please confirm.
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, thanks. So here's the Appalachian Trail. We can see that most of the points picked up by the day hikers were concentrated around the interview points, the triangle and the circle. And we have also many points really far from the trail. That could be like my mom's house or any other reference that are important to the hikers. When we join the answers of multi hikers, we can see that they are a little more concentrated along the trail, the Appalachian Trail, but we have some other points. And a strong connection with the the trail pointed by long distance hikers. Here we can see how connected with the trail and how big is the landscape they are connected to, right? The second question was, visitor motivated by mega trails show a greater sense of place, and to classify the hikers as motivated or non-motivated by the mega trail, I combined some questions like the spontaneous mentions of the name of the mega trail and some others. And I found that hikers motivated by the mega trails showed a higher sense of place than hikers non-motivated by long distance trails. This is probably expected, but it's interesting to note that even if you consider only day hikers, the more like the light green and light orange here, we can see that there is a significant difference too. So even day hikers motivated by long distance trails show a higher sense of place than day hikers non-motivated by long distance trails. Okay. So the influence of this trail brand goes beyond the activity itself, but the idea of the long distance trail influenced the sense of place, right? And the third section, the third question was, does the sense of place vary with the popularity of the trail section? It was expected that people in more isolated sections, more with opportunities to solitude and other experiences, show a higher sense of place. But I was surprised that even in very popular sections, and I'm referring, for example, to Klinkman's Dome in Appalachian Trail, or to Crater Lake National Park in Pacific Crest Trail, very popular sections, showed a higher sense of place, and I couldn't find a significant difference between popular and moderately used sections. So we can take some conservation outcomes from these finds. The first, I think it's like experiencing mega trails create a meaning and turning them in perceptible realms, even for people hiking short sections. And it's important to explain a little the concept of perceptible realms is came from landscape ecology and represents the level of we can perceive phenomena. For example, we have a lot of hard difficult to understand microscopical process like COVID or other virals, how they works. And the other side, we also have difficulties to understand process that occurs in very large landscapes, like migrations, species rank shifts, and other and climate change, etc. So I think I found that experiencing mega trails helps to create a meaning for these large landscapes. The idea of the trail takes the large landscape to the realm that people can perceive as a unique landscape, right? Another find is that the high sense of place people show in popular trail sections suggests that even in crowded places, there is potential to generate this awareness, this sense of place and connection to nature. And we can conclude from this that mega trails influence a wider audience far beyond the long distance hikers, right? And this, I think, it's really important, because if we think that we think that these mega trails attracts like a few thousand people per year through hiking, but millions of people for short hikers or few days hiking. So the fact that these trails can create sense of place only based on the idea of the mega trail, not necessarily hiking a large distance, we can influence a lot of more people and have a strong effect in the society in terms of awareness for nature or nature environments. I call this a brand effect because only the idea of the trail has this potential to raise the awareness of millions of visitors in natural attractions along mega trails. So I think we go far beyond the effect of on through hikers, right? Then, okay, I concluded that these trails can create sense of place for large landscapes, but if you are interested in nature conservation or pro-environmental behavior, it's necessary to explore how this sense of place reflects in pro-environmental behaviors. So I combined some other questionnaires to explore this connection from sense of place to pro-environmental behaviors. My hypothesis, I will not detail a lot because it's like 4 years of research, but in general, I was interested if there is a direct effect of sense of place to pro-environmental behaviors, or if there is no effect, or a third possibility was that this effect pass through a connection to nature as a whole, not specifically to that place, okay? And I combined different questions with the same universe of hikers, and I found that a connection to nature as a whole is a necessary mediator between sense of place and pro-environmental behavior, right? So it's not enough develop a sense for the place of the trail itself. And we can exemplify, for example, people that use the trails maybe to do exercise, physical activities, and they are not necessarily connected to that environment, thinking in nature and their importance. So I found that a connection to nature goes beyond the sense of place, and it's a necessary mediator to generate pro-environmental behavior. Okay. So joining these two points, we can say that experiencing nature in mega trails generates sense of place that can generate connection to nature and then pro-environmental behaviors. So we can conclude in this hiker's perspective that experiencing nature environments are important to forge a connection to nature as a whole. Sense of place is not sufficient to explain pro-environmental behaviors, but when this experience goes to connection to nature, they goes also to pro-environmental behavior. So encouraging hiking can be a valuable strategy to promote engagement in nature conservation. Okay. Then I'm going to another perspective, the community's perspectives, to explore another of these points that trails, trying to explore how these mega trails influence the economy and identity of gateway communities. Okay. My research questions in this point were that trail town programs influence key local stakeholders or actors' perceptions about the trail. If the importance of the trail in the local economy influence the perceptions of the local actors related to the trail, and how local actors perceive negative impacts of the trail. Okay. I used the triple crow again, but now exploring 10 gateway communities along the triple crow, 2 in Appalachian and 4 in Continental Divide and Pacific Crest, organized in pairs trying to represent communities that are part of the community programs, the Gateway Community Programs, officials, or in communities that are not officially Gateway Community Programs, part of the Gateway Community Programs. Okay, I interviewed local key actors like public managers, NGO managers, business owners, and some volunteers, and used a qualitative comparative analysis, comparing conditions and outcomes to understand the patterns and explore and discuss a little the patterns that I found. So the conditions was if each community was a case study, a case, and then if that community participate or not in trail town programs, the actual economic importance of tourism in that community, and the proportion of respondents that had personal experience in the trails. And my outcomes or dependent variables was the perception of the economic importance of the trail, the perception of the importance of the trail in the community identity, and the perception about eventual negative impacts of the trail in the community. And then these methods group the cases that have common conditions and outcomes, and we can see here in red the communities that are official trail towns, and they show a very similar answers, 3 of them totally identical and 1 with some difference. And this method showed that the participation in trail town programs explain all the case for economic importance, the perceptions of economic importance from each community, and 75% of the importance for the community identity. Only in PCT, there is no relation with participation in trail town programs and the perception of the importance in community identity. It's interesting to note that the Pacific Crest Trail Association stopped the trail town program because of the pandemic. So they were just starting the program. It's not so developed as the Continental Divide Trail Program and the Appalachian Trail Communities Program. Okay. Another find is that that's no clear relationship between the real relevance of tourism in the local economy and the perceptions of the local actors about the economic importance of the trail. So people can, the trail can be not so important for the local economy, but people perceive as important, and the opposite is can also be true. So there is no a clear relationship. And perception of negative impacts of trails on communities are very low for all the towns that I researched, except for Bishop in California in the Pacific Crest Trail. I'm showing you some of the ideas shared with me to illustrate these ideas. So about local economy, for example, Silver City, that's a trail town in CDT. An NGO manager says it's a boost for our local economy when we have hikers coming through. They're spending $1 at our restaurants and our local business. And on the other side, Lordsburg, that's close to Silver City, but it's not a trail town, but it's crossed by the trail also. The CDT is part of our economy for a couple of months, so it's not like so optimistic as in Silver City, right? About the community identity, we can exemplify with an example with the Appalachian Trail. Damascus is very famous trail town. And people were saying like Damascus consider itself the trail town USA. And that's one of the big contributors to that. For sure, it's part of our identity. Yeah, outdoor gear owner, store owner. And in Hampton, that's close to Damascus, but it's not a trail town. They don't recognize the trail as important. So another business owners says not so much the local identity. We would be identified more. There's a lot of people from around here to probably never hike. So there's no enthusiasm with the trail also. And about negative impacts in Bishop, the only city that shows that perceives the trail as negative impacts. There is a guy saying a lot of people read that book with Reese Witherspoon and thought, "Oh, I'm gonna do that." They can't bury the toilet paper. They're leaving their weights too close to the waters and things like that. So there's really negative perception. And Mount Shasta, they say most PCT hikers are pretty cool. I think they're not leaving trash and stuff, etc. So we can perceive this difference in trail towns and non-trail towns, right? So the community's outcomes, we can say that trail town programs work to build or at least strengthen these positive perceptions about the trails. The perceptions of economic benefits may not be based on reality. They can be more built by this work, connections and relationship with the trail people. And there is a general positive perceptions of the trail and hikers in general. And this is another that I couldn't explore in this presentation a lot, but it's interesting that the economic importance is not so high, but can keep some business and some communities, especially small communities, in the economy in good conditions. So we can say that tourism activities remains at a limited scale and seem to be a favorable context for sustainable tourism. So if we think in gateway communities in like maybe a national park or huge attractions, all the benefits and the problems are concentrated in few communities, right? If we think in mega trails, we are spreading these benefits and the problems for a lot of communities, so we can keep these impacts in small scales, and also for sure the benefits are more spread than in traditional gateway communities, right? Now I'm running a little to keep the time, but I hope you can understand well. Now, the third perspective is the nature perspective. I concentrate my research in the Appalachian Trail because it's the oldest one. It's located in a more degraded area because of all the historical process of land use, right? And because there is a more civic action, all the civic action in turn of the trail, around the trail. So I try to understand how the Appalachian Trail influenced the landscape connectivity in this in their area, right? My research questions were if the legal protection and civic actions in favor of the AT resulted in greater protected area coverage along the AT corridor or not. And is connectivity along the AT corridor greater than would be expected in the absence of the trail? If so, to what extent does the trail influence connectivity? There is a lot of studies, but some studies showing how these trails are well connected and they have potential as biodiversity or climate corridors, but I don't know any study showing if the trail itself influences this connectivity, or if only they are in the right place, the more preserved, the more natural places. Okay, so my interest was if the trail itself influences this connectivity along the history. So I reviewed the historical data on trail protection in the Appalachian. I used the Appalachian, the Trail News magazine collection from the ATC that was created in 1939, and looked for any register of actions to protect the trail, to protect the environments around the trails from 1939 to nowadays. And then until the 1960s, most of the actions focus on protecting the trail itself and rights of way and not the environment. But from the 1960s, there was a lot of actions looking to conservation in a more broader view. So in 1964 was created the AT Conservation Committee, and in 1968, probably everyone knows, that was published the National Trail System Act, recognizing the trails, AT and PCT at that time, and establishing a trail corridor with 300 meters or 1,000 feet around the trail as the trail corridor. And from 1978, an amendment in the National Trail System Act protected legally this corridor. And there is another landmarks like the creation of a team mega transect, and then finally in 2019 the AT Landscape Partnership and other initiatives. But I used the National Trail System Act as the border to explore how the trail influence protected areas and connectivity, right? So I used a counterfactual quasi-experimental approach that means scenarios before and after the intervention, the National Trail System, and also comparing the trail corridor with similar areas using as corridors, as controls, okay? And the 1968 was the threshold between before and after scenarios. And I explored different corridor widths, 300 meters, 2 kilometers, and 10 kilometers, trying to assess how is the influence of the trail. And here are the first results in terms of protected areas coverage. We can see in this graph that the darkest green is the 300-meter corridor, and that grows from zeros, that accelerate the creation of protected areas from 1968, and came from 9 to 9.9 in 1918, 50 years before the National Trail System Act, and then 50 years after the National Trail System, 89.5% of the trail corridor protected in some way. And then if you compare with larger, wider corridors or the control area, we have a huge, we find a huge difference in the trail corridor. And going beyond the legal protection, I tested the forest coverage, the preservation of natural areas along the trail corridor. So I picked up 100 random points along the AT and paired with 100 random points with same elevation, slope, and previous land use to compare how they evolved from 1968 to nowadays. So in the 300 meters wide width corridor, the corridor along the AT improved connectivity in 24%. In the control areas, they were less connected, 8.8%. And in 2 kilometers wide corridors, the connectivity improved 13%, and the control areas was 10% less connected. And if we consider 10 kilometer wide corridors, the Appalachian Trail corridors improved connectivity in around 2%, and the control areas was less connected in 9%. So for all these corridor widths, the Appalachian Trail has a significant better effect than control areas. And what's most important, a positive effect. While other areas, all of the other control areas were worse than they were in 1968. Okay, we can find many examples of how these trails influence positively the connectivity, and I picked up some examples to illustrate these results. So there's a lot of examples of campaigns against development projects like highways in North Carolina or Virginia that would cross the trail, or gas pipelines in New York and Virginia, and many other development projects that could impact the trail and the connectivity along the trail. And after civic actions, they were moved, relocated, or canceled. And there's other examples of the effective action of partners, volunteers, or the non-profit, in the case of AT, the Appalachian Trail Conservancy, to manage conflict with other uses like agricultural lands or others. Here in the right, we have an example of the Cumberland Valley, where after 10 years of negotiations, they established a narrow corridor crossing these plain areas very suitable for agriculture, with very narrow corridors, but that is the only pathway for animals in this landscape, animals that needs forest for sure. Here is another example. In some sections, for example, here is New York, Clarence Fenstock State Park. Here is a land use map in 1974, and here in 2012. And we can see that only a narrow corridor along the AT was preserved in this extensive landscape. In 1974, most of the area was forest, and nowadays only the AT corridor. So we can perceive clearly the effect of the trail in protect and promote connectivity, right? It's important to note that these narrow corridors in some areas, like these examples, are not enough to allow movements of many species that needs more wide corridors to move. So it's important, but we need to improve these actions to have a corridor wider than the official 300 meters, because they are strategic for wildlife, right? So trying to pack my finds and conclusions and maybe some guidelines for mega trail planning and management. For hikers, we can say that the potential to create place meaning and sense of place and reach a wider audience suggests that reinforcing the trail brand could raise awareness and support to conservation initiatives. So maybe reinforce signage and outreach in specific popular sections could be effective to engage more people in the idea of mega trails and create sense of place for them. And another idea is create alternate routes to provide enjoyable experience for different audience. I think we don't have enough time to explore a lot this question, but for example, Appalachian Trail cross most of the popular attractions along the Appalachian Mountains. On another way, Pacific Crest sometimes avoid the too crowded sections. For example, in Crater Lake National Park, the Pacific Crest pass far away the crater lake, but most of the people take an alternate route to see the lake. So having more natural routes or more popular routes and combine these different options could be interesting to reach different audience and engage more people with the trail. Looking to communities, trails plays a role in community identity and go beyond economic benefits. And we can say that Trail Town programs really works to influence the perceptions. And mega trails can spread benefits and impacts among many gateway communities, keeping tourism in more sustainable levels. And finally, looking to natural environment, as I said, actions to protect the trail influence a wider corridor and landscape than the trail itself. Protect wide corridors and enhance matrix permeability in critical sections. It's strategic. And locate the trail on the edge in place where the corridor width is critical could be interesting to protect more or preserve more the forests for wildlife movements. Finally, mega trails can play an important role as conservation tools, but how they are planned, managed, and outreached is essential to define their level of success. Partnerships around mega trails can create a favorable scenario for nature conservation. We can join government power and capacity with non-profits engagement and flexibility to build a more strong initiative. And finally, we can say that the visionary Benton McKay was right when in 1921 he proposed the Appalachian Trail and said that he could be a way to promote experience and connection with nature, strengthen sustainable rural communities, and could be an effective tool to landscape scale planning. So I think my finds reinforce the arguments frequently presented in favor of these trails, but poorly demonstrated by more strong research. So finally, I'd like to thank all of you that are here watching me, and the financial support from the TCD program, the University of Florida, the Forest Service, and the technical support for the nonprofits Appalachian Trail Conservancy, Continental Divide Trail Coalition, and the Pacific Trails Association. So thank you, and I'm open to questions and to talk a little more about some topics. Thank you, Scaria.
Awesome. Thank you so much for presenting all your research. This was amazing. We do have a couple questions in the chat. Was there a difference among the three trails with feeling the broader sense of place. Was it stronger for the PCT and CDT, which have a much broader natural landscape and less developed landscape than does most of the AT?
Let me go back. Here, I'm not demonstrating that all the hikers in the same category, but each trail we can compare the difference, for example, between day hikers and long distance hikers. There are some difference. Joining all the trails, we can see that the significant from long distance hikers is significant more than day hikers. But for example, in CDT, there is no significant difference. In PCT, there is a almost significant, and they are more significant in AT. I think this difference is related to how these trails works with the trail brands. AT invests a lot in the trail brand. At the same time, for example, PCT opted for use a more discreet signage and not and they are investing more in the true hikers than in eventual day hikers. So they are more focused on long distance hikers, and the effect is not as different, as so strong as in the AT. And we can perceive this in most of this difference. So I think there is some difference between the trails, and I related them to different management choices by the managers. Okay. I don't know if it answers what, but
Yeah, thanks. Could you talk for a minute about the term sense of place, and what its base meaning and what are the primary components of the concept?
okay. I cut some parts of my defense presentation because I don't have enough time, but it's important to define not only sense of place, but place itself. Place is not only a location. Place is defined of a meaningful location. So we can have a local, or if we put a meaning in that local, we have a place, right? And the sense of place is the perception of how this local can be important. I have the definition, the formal definition somewhere here. Oh, it's not easy to find. So sense of place can be defined as connection with a place specific, a positive connection, a meaningful connection, and there is different constructs to, for example, the identity with that place, the dependence with that place to do something. So it's a more it's a connection with a meaningful place, right?
Thanks.
Yeah.
In the case of landscape level conservation in Brazil, do you think that proposed and existing megatrails have increased political support for land protection or collaboration for stewardship activities?
Sorry, could you repeat the beginning?
Yeah. So in the case of landscape level conservation in Brazil.
Oh, okay, in Brazil. Okay, thank you. I was not sure in Brazil. Yeah, I think it's interesting the difference that we are perceiving here in Brazil, because in the US, my perception is that these mega trails are using some resources focused on tourism and outdoor activities to promote nature conservation. And here we have the opposite. We are taking money from forest restoration and for natural conservation to improve the trail, because we have more access to funds for nature conservation than for tourism or outdoor activities. So we are combining this in projects that we restore corridors. For example, in the Atlantic Forest Trail, we are just beginning the implementation of the trail, but we restored more than 400 hectares of forest corridors until now. So we are attracting funding from nature conservation and encouraging people to go to the trail, because the outdoor activity, the hiking culture is not so strong in Brazil as in the US. So we are using the funds for conservation projects to promote this contact with nature, believing that this contact have consequences in long term in terms of public support for nature conservation. So I think there's some difference, but we are growing. The last year was created a non-profit specific for the Atlantic Forest Trail. Before we worked with many partners. So there, I think this agenda is growing in Brazil. And recently was created a Brazilian Trails Network, that there are more other projects of long distance trails being implemented, some of them really interesting. So I think this agenda is growing, and we can contribute as trail corridors and biodiversity corridors in Brazil too.
Great. We'll just do a couple more questions in our remaining minutes. Did you encounter how recreation users may negatively impact wildlife and impair the wildlife corridor connectivity?
I didn't explore this in my research, but I read a lot of reference, so I can comment some of other people results, and we can perceive some punctual impacts, for example, in animal movements related to hikers. But in general, there's like a time avoiding. For example, animals avoid to use the trail when there is a lot of hikers during the day, but they use at the night. Or if we think in these long distance trails, we can see the true hikers bubble, right? The right time to hike the trails. So most of the year, this corridor is less used than for example in the summer. So animals can use these corridors when the hikers are not there. And there are some species that don't avoid hikers. They only avoid like be the presence of the hiker too close, but they avoid like 5 meters or 10 meters. It's not a huge impact. So I think that there is some impact, but at the end, the impact is more beneficial than negative for us trail corridors, right?
Awesome. And one last question. What are your next steps or goals with your research? Are you still working with megatrails?
Yeah. In terms of research, I have the interest to apply these ideas in Brazilian megatrails, trying to maybe having a time zero to compare in some years the effect of these trails, because we are just beginning. I have to publish my findings. I only defended my dissertation recently, but I'm preparing scientific papers to publish. And I have a lot of data to explore some other approaches related to mega trails. For example, how they can work in a more diverse way, for example, using the recreation opportunity spectrum to as a reference to have a different audience in the same mega trail. There is a lot of possibilities to explore my data and discuss these points. So I hope I can combine all my tasks as the superintendent of a national park here with a research activity to publish them and explore a lot of new data and my data that I was already having.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ernesto. Thank you everyone who attended today. And yeah, your feedback is super important to PNTS. So I put a quick link in the chat where you can take a 1 to 2 minute survey to let us know what you thought about the webinar today. And if you have any additional questions or would like to get in touch with Ernesto, please feel free to reach out. I'll send his contact info along with a link to the recording of this webinar in a follow-up email to you. And yeah, just thank you again so much to everyone who attended and Ernesto, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks, everybody.